This is NEGOTIATEx TV.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on the NEGOTIATEx podcast. We are continuing our conversation with Andy Fairie, cognitive behavioral therapist, retired police officer, and hostage crisis negotiator and author. If you haven't already checked out part A of this show, be sure to do that first. Let's jump in the conversation with Andy. The next area is purpose. So why is purpose important in a negotiation?
So certainly the definition of a negotiation from when you go on your course in Scotland, you're told, and again, this is in public domain, I'm not telling anything that's not already out there, but a negotiation is a conversation with a purpose. But the reason I've put purpose in there is because it is so easy to get derailed on purpose, on what your purpose is. So for example, if you ever had a conversation or an argument with someone that's close to you, and you've maybe gone to work the next day and says, I had a real rotten argument with my other half the other night. And you say, well, what was it about? Oh, she didn't put her shoes on, or she didn't take her shoes off when they came in the door, the carpet got messed up. And then you stop and you say, but it wasn't about that, really. And it's those conversations where you are arguing about one thing, but really something else is at the back of it. And you're never going to get any sort of resolution, meaningful resolution, arguing about this surface issue. What's at the core of it? And I've seen it. I've seen it a lot with police officers. It's a bit like that thing where somebody will turn up at an incident. And I want your name. You're not getting my name. Here's my number. Why are you not giving me your name? And then suddenly we're in an argument about, are you getting to know the name of the police officer? And that's not going to sort out why the police were called there in the first place. Likewise, I've seen it with negotiators, and probably done it myself, where you begin to form a rapport with someone. And it gets to the stage you're having such a great conversation, just about shooting the breeze. You've got something in common, you're talking about it, you're having a great old time, but you're not actually getting towards getting that person out of crisis. And what happens, that person is enjoying the conversation so much, they want to keep it going and keep it going and keep it going. And suddenly we're derailed on purpose, because the purpose is get that person to safety. But really, we've kind of got stuck on the purpose of just having a good natter, as we'd say in Scotland. And like I say, it's really easy to become lost on purpose, but it's also very easy to talk at cross purposes. So you may have one individual who is there to talk about one thing, and another individual who is there to talk about a completely different objective. They're never going to work. Very rarely are they going to find any sort of resolution. And the easiest way to know what your purpose is, tell someone what it is. So my purpose here is to explain this simple model to you. That's why I'm here today. And it may well be, Nolan turns around and says, well, we're not really interested in the simple model. We want to know more about your police experience. Well, it's fair enough. Now we know we've got different purposes, and we've got to try and work out how can we get somewhere to a common purpose. Because if we can, that's when we can start to have some meaningful dialogue. Yeah, and I always tell folks, purpose needs to be formulated. We need to know, right? It's not accidentally found later on. Be like, oh, is that what we're here about? It's we're intentional around it. And I like how you frame that. We're going through the simple model. The L is listen. I feel like we hear a lot about, how important active listening is. In your own experiences, why is listening so important or powerful? What gets in the way of our ability to listen well? And then Nolan was willing to raise his hand and saying he needs to work on empathy. One of the things I need to work on is my own listening skills. How would you coach and advise somebody who just says, I get it, and I still struggle with it? So why is listening important? If you're not listened to, you don't exist. It's that simple. And people, particularly people who are in crisis, are in crisis because they feel they are completely alone. Nobody has listened to them. I think there's a business parallel. If you're unhappy as a customer and the organization you're unhappy with are not listening to you, you're going to be even more unhappy as a customer. Active listening, yeah, we hear a lot about it, but not really many people know what it means. And I suppose it's easy to say what it isn't. It isn't the opposite, which is passive listening. So you can be sitting there, sort of half watching television, half in a conversation, maybe looking on your phone, and you're hearing things, and you're maybe even chatting away. And you know what? That's fine. That's probably 99% of conversations with people, and that's fine. That works. Active listening. Well, first of all, you actually have to actively participate in that listening. The barriers to it, it takes effort. It takes energy. It takes practice. And you asked, right, how can I improve my listening? And I've got another mnemonic, called promises. And there's various active listening tools in there. I'll come to them in a minute. If you look at it again, if you look in the negotiating world, when it comes to active listening, they will quite often hit you with the mnemonic more pies. Yeah. Which is fine, but it just makes me hungry whenever I think about it. And I thought promises was a bit more uplifting. So what is promises? So it's a series of tools to try and improve your active listening. So the first one, paraphrasing. So it's just restating what you've been told, but using your words. So Aram, you said you're not that confident about your own listening skills and you're curious about what you can do to improve it. That's paraphrasing. Mm-hmm. Reflecting, mirroring. So reflecting might be where you are echoing the words that somebody said. So if somebody says a really significant word, I just can't go on anymore. You just reflect back those significant words. And it hopefully encourages them to then continue that phrase or paragraph or sentence. Mirroring is where you attempt to mirror the emotion of someone. So if someone's really, really heightened emotions, you get up there with them on that level, and then within the space of 2 or 3 words, bring it back down. And hopefully, they might come down with you. Or conversely, if someone's really morose, you start off really quiet, matching their energy levels, and then try and bring it up to try and get them out of that moroseness and that period of depression. And hopefully they'll come up with you. It doesn't always work, but it's worth a try. Open questions. The who, where, why, when, how, what. Encouraging answers that are more than one word. Closed questions are good if you need to confirm something. Are you coming out the house from this door or that door? Why can't you come out the house? And it just encourages a longer answer than one word. Minimal encouragers. Aram's giving me a visual minimal encourager by nodding his head. He's listening, he wants to hear more. Verbal encouragers, yeah, all right, yeah, good, great. They just let people know I'm listening, keep talking. I when because statements. So I get worried when Aram tells me he wants to improve his listening skills because it puts pressure on me to try and give him something to work with. And it lets the person that you're listening know what effect their words are having on me. S, silence. silence is a great one. People do not like silence. Get in a taxi, stay silent, and see how long it takes a taxi driver to say something, because people are uncomfortable with silence. And sometimes you just need to use that and just let them, sooner or later, they will jump in with something.
I was going to say on silence, how often have I been the one that needed to stay silent?
Exactly.
And I fill the space. Maybe I'm doing it right now, but I fill the space unnecessarily, and it cost me an opportunity to hear something I needed to hear.
No, it's a great example, but you know, you'll feel, like I say, next time you are in a taxi, say nothing, and that discomfort you feel will probably be the same discomfort the driver feels, and who cracks first. That's all I always sort of try and do. It doesn't take long. Emotional labeling, again, it's just recognizing the emotions that someone is experiencing, and it's just validating them. It's letting them know, I can see you're really upset, because up till now maybe nobody's paid any attention to the fact that that person is upset. Finally, summarising, which is a little bit like paraphrasing, but it tends to sort of look at a situation as a whole. So the summary would be, right, we're kind of 45 minutes or so into this podcast. We've talked a lot about my early police career, and we're into this simple model. Am I kind of right in where we are? How are we doing? And that just,
great.
Thank you. People want to jump in and say, well, unfortunately in negotiation, they usually tell you, you're doing rubbish, you know, but they'll tell you why you're doing rubbish, and that gives you something to work with. So it's about encouraging people to keep talking, because that's the currency. That is what you are going to use in order to help show people that they're valued, because they're being listened to, and they exist. And it's something that, as a CBT therapist, it's become even more clear to me. At the end of every session, I always ask, we finish the session, what's worked for you? And 9 times out of 10, they will say the fact that someone has listened to me. And they've listened to me without trying to put forward their solution. Because that's another part. When you're listening to someone, they don't necessarily want you to solve their problems. They just want you to hear them. I get that a lot from clients as well. I tell my friends my problems, and I just want them to acknowledge what a rubbish situation I'm in. But actually, they try to help me. And of course they do. They're nice people. They want to help their friend. But the best help they can give is actually just acknowledging where that person is and encouraging them to keep talking, because chances are they'll come up with their own solution. Now, how do you practice this, Aram?
Yeah.
It's about, and it is, the word is just practice. It's getting out there. It's also perhaps, there are a lot of great YouTube videos or a news clip. Get a news clip when you see a politician that you don't like, and you hear him give his bit to the reporter. Just try a little bit of, what would you do in that situation? Would you paraphrase? Would you summarise? Bit of silence? Try it. And every conversation should be some sort of practice. If you go and get a coffee, try and find something out that's important to the person that's serving you the coffee, using those active listening skills.
Well, as appropriate, the last one is empathize, and I have it. So why can empathy often be hard to define as well as put into practice?
Yeah, it can be hard to define, because it is easier to say what it's not. Because a lot of people confuse it with sympathy. So I think the perfect example is when you hear that someone close to someone has died. You get that phrase that makes me wince. I'm sorry for your loss. Well, okay, you're sorry. But how do I feel?
Right.
I'm the person that's lost someone. And that's what empathizing is about. Empathizing, if you have you've had that conversation, or you've got enough information to say, I heard about your mum passing away there. That would have been really tough for you and your family, I'm guessing. And then suddenly that person thinks, this person's interested in how I feel. Not telling me how sorry they are. They want to know how I feel. And that's what empathizing is. Empathizing, it comes from the Greek word into emotion. You are going into the emotions of someone else. And that's great, but it's only of limited use if you don't let that person know that you've gone into their emotions. And again, it's that thing about existing as a human. Someone has recognized, I have got human feelings here, and these are my feelings. Someone can see how the emotions and the moods that I'm going through. In terms of how do you improve your empathy? It takes practice. Things like emotional labeling. Yeah, when you see a clip of someone, particularly if it's somebody you don't agree with on TV and they make a statement, try and empathise. What's important to them? And it's about that accepting thing. It doesn't have to be important to you. You don't have to agree with them. What have you seen that is important to them? The emotional labelling. Are they showing emotions? Reading is great for this. If you read a bit of a bit of fiction, again, what's that character thinking? Why is he thinking that way? What is important to them? And again, becoming a CBT therapist improved me here because I wasn't very good at recognising my own emotions, let alone anyone else's. So what I did, and what I still do, in the morning I would wake up, and after I'd had my breakfast, I would think, what's my emotion today? What am I feeling? And the trick with emotions is generally they're single words, okay? So an emotion would be happy, sad, angry, frustrated, nervous, anxious. If it stretches to more than one word, I'm a wee bit worried about making this journey in the rush hour traffic. That's a thought. Worried is an emotion. So yeah, every morning I sit and think, what emotion am I feeling? Every evening before I go to sleep, what emotion am I feeling? I used to write it down. I don't do that anymore. But I still ask myself that question. And what I found, of course, is actually I kind of had 4 emotions: happy, angry, worried, sad. That was it. And the rule is write it down, but don't use the same word twice in any one week. And if you run out of emotions, that's fine. There are emotions, there are huge lists of emotions on the internet. Go get one, write one down, look at it, pick one that fits you that day. And that will improve your emotional vocabulary. And when you improve your own emotional vocabulary, it will improve your ability to recognize emotions in others. And don't be afraid to, practice it on your colleagues. You seem really happy today. That's great to see. Or actually, you look a little bit worried today. Is everything okay? And when they, if and when they respond to you, do that thing of paraphrasing or emotional labeling, and hopefully along the way that will improve your ability to empathize.
Those are great steps, both with what you were sharing around listening, and then just now with empathy. In terms of what I really liked in terms of the exercises that I've written down are doing them with folks that I may not agree with.
Yeah.
Because it feels like, of course I listen to someone when I'm like agreeing with what they're saying, or I can connect through emotions when I agree with what you're saying. How do I still, listen well and effectively empathize when I don't? So great exercises.
And sorry, Aram, I'll just jump in. It is, really interesting to say that about people you don't agree with, because if you could actually practice these skills in real life with people who aren't agreeing with you, chances are they will find it much easier to disagree with you if they feel that they've been listened to. And the only way they're going to know that they've been listened to is if you tell them.
So in your bio, we talked about protest groups in Scotland, talking about people may not agree with. How are you able to implement aspects of the simple model in the process in which you engaged with these groups to reduce their effects on the community? Can you share a little bit about that?
Certainly, and you know, a bit of background. So I was a public order officer, and what that means is if there was a situation where there's going to be public disorder, a riot would be the extreme end of it, where we'd have to be getting helmets on and protective equipment and shields. That's where we would be getting deployed. And in Scotland, around about 2010, 2015, we saw a real increase in groups that were protesting about sort of right-wing issues, immigration, what have you. And again, you know, part of our philosophy, certainly in the UK, is people are allowed to have their right to free speech. But they would turn up. There would generally be another group that were protesting against what they were protesting, and the two would come to blows. And you're not talking huge numbers. You're talking maybe in total 30, 40, 50 people. But to try and stop them and keep them apart and have a contingency if they didn't keep apart, and because we didn't know how many were going to turn up at any time, we would deploy 250, 300 officers just for that. And if you were a public order officer, you were getting your rest days cancelled left, right and centre. And when that was happening, I could see protest groups were spoken to in completely different ways. Some incident commanders would be right there in the middle, in the thick of it, speaking to them, which was great, but you could never get a decision off them because they were in the middle speaking to someone. Some incident commanders would have nothing to do with them at all, and the communicating with them was negligible. And they would get told one thing one weekend by one group of officers, another thing another weekend by another group of officers, and it would be very minimal. The only communication with the groups would be on the day. So we looked at, you know, I was a negotiator at that point, and I considered, could we use our negotiation skills to improve that communication? And there was also a shift in England at what they called protester liaison officers. So I went down, I was one of the first officers, there were three of us went down, and we went on the protester liaison course, as it was called then. But it was a 2-day course. It covered public order legislation, public order tactics and terminology. Didn't really say anything about communicating with people. So we came back and we incorporated that, but we emphasised the communication aspect of it. And it was very important that we communicated with people before, during, and after their protests. And people would always say, such and such a protest group, they won't have anything to do with you. They won't speak to you. But we would always make the offer, and they would always say, yes, come in. So I remember one particular group. So they were a group of Irish Republican supporters. They would have frequent marches. They would get targeted by pro-unionist supporters. Again, we were told the Irish Republican supporters will not speak to you. We phoned them up. We said, can we come and have a cup of tea and just talk about these marches? Because you don't seem very happy with the police response. And they said yes, and we went along, and I made a point of making sure we had some milk and some biscuits, and we sat down, making it possible to talk. What was our purpose? Certainly the police purpose was to allow people their right to march on whatever issue they wanted to march on, right, but do it in a way that kept people safe. And that meant that them as marchers, it meant the counter-protesters, it meant the public that were just walking by at the time. They had quite a similar purpose. They just wanted to get the message out and not get into any bother. And so it was sort of sitting down, listening, empathizing, understanding what was important to them. So, for example, the organizer of the marches says, well, you always say the police are there to look after the crowd outside the march. But when we march past, all the police officers are turned and looking at us as if we're the people causing the problem. So I said to the officers, when the march passes, we'll deal with what's happening in the march. We'll keep our eyes on that. Turn around and look at the crowd, because we're telling the marchers that the crowd are the problem. And they did that. And suddenly it's a small thing, but it's that thing that you mentioned, Aram, about building up trust. It's these, and then next time we spoke to them, we said, well, you know what, you had a good point about all these police there to look after everyone outside the march, but they're looking at you. So we've asked them to turn around. We did that for you. And it just helps reinforce that trust building process. So when it came to designing our own course in Scotland, we went from a 2-day course, which had the public order, tactics and legislation, and we bolted on 3 days of communication skills and active listening skills, so that when people are engaging, or when our officers were engaging with protesters before, during and after, we were giving them the best chance possible. And it's significant. It took so much heat out of those protests. Whereas before, you could quite easily get 250 or so police officers. It very quickly went down to about 50, 60, because our management had confidence that in what was likely to happen as a result of the information that we were getting and feeding back to them. So they didn't have to pile on lots of extra police officers in case or what if. And then eventually it went from 50 down to, you might get a van or two, 8, 16 police officers. It's now, anytime there's any kind of major event or protest, police liaison officers, as we call them now, are very much a key part of that. And it's very much embedded in the negotiator unit. So the negotiator unit in Scotland has a small cadre of dedicated full-time officers, and at least one of those officers at any one time is dealing with the police liaison kind of coordination role. And, 2 years ago, we had COP26, a huge environmental gathering of the parties, as they call it, or conference of the parties. Huge problems, major riots at previous ones. And yes, there were a lot of protests. There was some minor disruption rather than disorder. And a large part of that was due to putting police liaison officers on the ground and encouraging them to utilise the communication skills that we were teaching them.
That's awesome. And it's good to see the positive effects of everything like that. So I also know that you've referenced your work as a CBT therapist a few times. What can you share with our listeners about this work and that might apply in their own lives?
Yeah. So, cognitive behavioural therapy, it can be applied in a number of ways. It can be applied online. You can get apps that sort of lead you through various sort of flow charts. For me, it's a talking therapy. And it's very much evidence-based. There's a lot of evidence to show its effectiveness now for conditions such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, addictions. And the core sort of philosophy of it, if you like, is the cognitive bit, what you think and what you feel relates to the behavioural bit, what you do. So you've got those three things. What you feel, and that might be physical or emotionally. What you think and what you do. That forms a triad, a triangle. And the idea is that they are connected. You change one, it will have an impact on the other two. So if there is something that's troubling you, so for example, it might be your thoughts. If you're depressed, you may have a negative view of yourself or of other people or of your future, well, it's difficult to change those thoughts on their own. It's not impossible, but it's difficult. But actually, because you're depressed, you're generally not doing anything. So if you can change your behavior, even if it's just, getting out of bed, walking around the house and going back into bed, that will have ever such a slight impact on your thoughts and on your feelings of depression. And so what you do, like I say, you target the area that's easiest to target, and eventually it'll affect the other two. So that's CBT in a nutshell. In terms of how to apply it to yourself, well, first of all, be aware of your emotions. That was something that I really had to work hard at. I went through my police service, and people would always say, Andy, you know what? No matter what's happening, he is a centre of calm. He is placid. He will not be getting flustered or excited or panicking. Whatever happens, he will deal with it. And I took that as a compliment until I started thinking about it from a CBT perspective. And I thought, actually, maybe it meant I was just emotionally dead. That's why I can only name 4 emotions when I try. And it's about becoming aware of those emotions. So becoming more aware of your emotions, becoming aware of your thoughts, and becoming aware of what you're doing and how those 3 things are linked together. So quick example, 5 minutes before tonight's podcast, my heart's racing. I'm getting nervous.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, why do I do this? I'm going to make a hash of it. Why do I put myself through this? And what I have to do is you have to stop. You have to say, right, and name it. Name the emotion to tame it. I'm nervous. Right. I can do a bit of breathing. Just 10 seconds, bit of breathing. Right. Okay, get it. Okay, what are my thoughts? What's going to happen? Nothing. So far, Nolan's been emailing me. Seems a nice guy. I've watched the other podcasts. They all seem good. And if I was, I do a wee sort of hobbyist podcast on the side, and I get nervous. So when I'm interviewing people, so maybe Aram and Nolan will be getting nervous too. So we're all in it together.
Right.
I'm now, and because I'm breathing, my heart's slowing down, and suddenly I'm thinking, maybe I can do this. So it's just in terms of how people can apply that to themselves at a very simple level. Be aware of your emotions. So work on that. Do the emotion thing in the morning and the evening. Be aware of your thoughts. Know your feelings in your physical body and what you're doing. And just think, right, of these, I can't tackle some of them. What can I tackle? And go with that. And you'll probably find the other things that are troubling you will follow.
Andy, earlier in the program, you talked about how crisis negotiation work you did was about helping somebody right there and now get into an immediate solution versus this CBT therapist work you do, which is really about a long-standing sustainable change with people. It's probably an unfair question to ask, but which one's more difficult?
Oh, that's a great question. Because there's such different things, aren't they? And it's a bit like children. I love them both the same. But you know what? I loved the adrenaline and the excitement of the negotiating crisis thing, because you're getting involved in some, serious incidents, and you were able to get, and you're front and center, and you were able to get a successful resolution. So there's a real buzz from that. There's an instant buzz from that. I suppose that the difficulty is you would walk away from that poor individual that might have been threatening to throw themselves off a bridge, and you would never see them again. You had no idea, really, the long-term effects of what had happened or how they were going to get on. Conversely, working with clients where you are actually able to see this person has gone, a period of 10 weeks, this person has gone from a position of not getting out of bed to actually getting a job and functioning at it and actually beginning to like themselves and like life. And that's a real great buzz, because you can see that actually that is long-lasting change. Oh, but I do believe if you're asked a question, I just can't, I'm not going to give you an answer one way or the other. I mean, I suppose as I've matured, since I became a negotiator, my desire for that adrenaline rush is perhaps, I've done it now. I've done the blue lights and the sirens and the dramatic scenes. So I suppose being able now to sort of work in a more relaxed manner and achieve long-lasting change, that's where my focus is and what I'm really enjoying at the moment.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, before I turn it over to Nolan to conclude, this has been a fascinating interview. To put you at ease, both just framework, stories, application, things to go practice. It's had it all. I know we haven't even fully explored kind of everything we could. Want to give you one last opportunity just to say, what didn't we ask you? Maybe we should have, or just something you'd like to leave with listeners as a final thought. Andy, give you one final moment here.
No, I do appreciate that. I suppose I'm not going to say anything I haven't said already. I've experienced a big change in my life by becoming more emotionally aware myself. And it took effort. It took me, I had to write down the thing in the morning. I had to write down an emotion in the evening. I had to go and get a list of emotions because I didn't have many. And you know what? That has been a real change in my life for the better. So I would just encourage people, and I'm going to fire something back at you very quickly, Aram and Nolan, because I don't have a great business negotiating background at all. I wouldn't pretend to lecture others about that. But what I see a lot of is when people are putting up posts about business negotiating is don't take emotions into the negotiating room. And I actually think that's wrong myself, from a position of complete ignorance. And I'll tell you why, because you know what? Humans are emotions.
Yeah.
They're emotional beings. Those emotions are coming into that negotiating room, whether you want them there or not. So you know what? Be aware of them, name them to tame them. And actually, if I'm a business person doing a negotiation, I don't want to negotiate with Mr. Spock. I want someone that cares about the thing that we're talking about, and I can see they care about it.
That's right.
So I would say, be more emotionally aware. I don't know what your thoughts are about, just very quickly. It's not...
I agree with you, Andy. So Nolan and I would say that emotions are present. The conversations we're having, that do you demonstrate that you understand how I operate my business or operate this aspect, or how my business runs and makes money? Can you show that understanding? When you don't, are you saying that by your words, are you saying I'm a bad manager? Are you saying I'm incompetent? Are you saying that I'm trying to be unfair in my pricing? So I think it's really easy to focus on the substantive components of a business negotiation and forget these relational aspects, and they're there. They are absolutely 100% present. And so I think everything you have said applies to those contexts. It certainly applies to the military negotiations that Nolan and I were involved in Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere as well. So tremendous overlap.
So feel the emotion. That would be the note I would end on.
Yeah. Well, Andy, I just want to say thanks. This has been marvelous. Really appreciate you spending the time with us. I know it's evening there. So thank you for that, and just wish you the best.
Thanks very much. I really appreciated that.
Well, that is it for us on today's podcast. If you haven't already, please rate, review, and subscribe to NEGOTIATEx Podcast, and we'll see you in the next one. Hey, thanks for checking out this video on NEGOTIATEx TV. If you found any value at all, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification icon if you want to be notified of future videos. And then we also have a couple videos over here that you might be interested in checking out. If you and your small business, your team are looking to get negotiations or leadership training, then you can head over to NEGOTIATEx.com and learn more about the coaching services we offer. Thanks, and I'll see you over in the next video.